Hello and welcome to the Welsh Rugby Roundup show, the Dragons Balls, and it's very, very good to be here, isn't it? And happy St. David's Day, Diadgol Dewi Hapus. I'm joined by my two wonderful co-hosts, Rhian and Ben. How are we both doing? Are we okay?
Oh, we're pretty happy, I think.
Yes.
The three friends.
We are pretty happy. I think we are pretty happy.
Yeah, I think weekend at the office.
Yeah, quite a weekend. Yeah, it's been a good weekend, and we are certainly going to get into everything. Just before we crack on, be sure to like and follow if you're watching on Facebook, and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. We have a lot of exciting things coming up. Before we crack on with the Six Nations news, there is a bit of news from within Welsh Rugby that we want to crack on with and quickly chat about. So let's talk about the Pro 14 action from this weekend. Let's start with Friday night's game. Cardiff Blues losing at home 11 points to 20 against Munster. Ben, you're a Cardiff Blues fan. What was your assessment of the game?
Yeah, it was a situation where we had a relatively strong side out, and I thought we could compete. But when you've got the class that Munster have, and they came down to win that game and win it well. Just disappointed from the Blues side of things. We picked a really exciting attacking team, and it just didn't seem to click at all. There were a couple of shining lights, which we'll talk about in a second, but on the whole, I think lacked a little bit of grit and didn't really front up, especially that try Munster scored at the end. I think that really let us down. But as we say, it's another loss. Young will be praying for those internationals to come back as soon as possible. But yeah, we are where we are at the moment.
Yeah, I was impressed, though, by young Ben Thomas, of course. Tell us a little bit about him, because he really impressed me, actually. Played some really nice rugby with ball in hand, confident young player. I never heard about him before this game, so tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, so I haven't got a massive background on him, but I remember the first game that I saw him play. It was in a Challenge Cup game, and he started at inside centre. Really, really promising player that day, and it looked almost at that time, we had Jared playing at 10 and we had Ben Thomas at 12, and it looked like we were going down the route of a dual playmaker, because Ben Thomas looked so comfortable in that first receiver position. But then, since then, he sort of dropped in and out of the side. Obviously, when the likes of Halaholo and Lilo in the centre, it's going to be difficult for him to get a game. But when he does play, he always seems to step up to the plate. And I thought Friday night, his first start with that number 10 jersey, I think he played really, really well. And he looked extremely mature out there. He passed it when it was on, and he kicked sensibly when it wasn't. And just fingers crossed that he gets a little bit more of a chance to have a run at games, because like we said, we got Priestland coming across next season. Fingers crossed Jared Evans signs as well. So he's got to find his identity within that Blue side pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what he does, but I was very impressed by him. But Munster win that game, and Blues, unfortunately, lost that one. And the other game on the Saturday then, Ulster winning 21 points against my team, the Ospreys. Keelan Giles scored in the first minute. I thought, is this it? Are we going to beat Ulster away from home? But it wasn't to be. For me, from an Ospreys point of view, I mean, it couldn't have got less boring than the week before, where we beat Zebra 10 points to 0. That was pretty horrendous. But against Ulster, it's very difficult to win away from home. They're probably the second best team in the league, if we're being totally honest, behind Leinster at the minute. And yeah, I don't expect us to be competing with them quite yet. I think we are in the class below. I think you got Leinster and Ulster at the top, then you got the likes of Munster and Ospreys, then you got the Blues and the Scarlets, and then so on and so forth. And we will get to the Dragons in a minute. But
I'm just at the bottom.
But I think for us, it's a big game. It was a difficult game. We've got a big game coming up against the Dragons, of course, on Saturday. But I'm not too disappointed with that game. It was good to see Stephen Myler back playing as well. Let's quickly then talk about the Dragons, Rhian, losing against Zebra, 26 points to 15. Although Jonah Holmes did get 2 tries, what was your assessment of this game, do you think?
Nice tries, but yeah, it was was a game to forget. I guess, it was so frustrating to watch. They create opportunities, but they just can't. They can't get into they couldn't get into Zebra's half or their 22. And the inaccuracies around the breakdown meant that, they had some easy ins, and the whole thing at the beginning of the game or before going in, and they knew they had to stop them and slow them down, and they failed dismally, to be honest. And now they've got a week to pull themselves around, because they're coming to Australia, aren't they? They're playing the Brewery Fields on Saturday, so they got a lot of work this week. I think I don't know, nothing's clicking, and we've had this conversation before about the Dragons. On paper, they're great, but there just doesn't seem to be that. I don't know, the cohesion that they need. Again, it's frustrating because it's little things that need to be sorted, but they end up with quite big things in the course of the match.
Yeah, I thought fair play to Zebra is a massive win for them. And I remember saying at the start of the season, Zebra aren't going to win a game this season. It's not going to happen. And then the day after, they played us and we lost against them. So they have won a couple of games this season. But for Dragons, that'll be really disappointing. But Ben, there was some breaking news about the European rugby competitions over the past week.
Yeah, so back last week, a decision was made. Obviously, we had some difficulties in the fact the games were postponed due to COVID and due to travel restrictions in and out of France. So, in fairness, the EPCR, they had to come together and they had to make a decision quickly, because clubs' calendars are full now pretty much until the end of the year. So they had to make a decision. They had to make it quickly. They had to bear in mind a few different aspects. They had to look at the fact that the French still seem to be putting up this barrier in terms of the travel restrictions in and out of France, but also looking from Premiership rugby side of things. The sides in England, that they all came together and said, look, we can't afford to reschedule these games. We have no spare time and we haven't got the players to be able to do, well, we're going to wear ourselves too thin then, effectively. So the decision was reached that we're going to go to a last 16 in both competitions. And I'll talk a little bit now just about how that's going to transpire, what it means for us in Wales and the Welsh regions. But firstly, if we look at the Champions Cup side of things, so if we look at it, the way that they've done it is the top 8 sides from Pool A and Pool B on the left and the right of the screen. Those top 8 sides, they qualified automatically. You'll see that in gold, these are the sides that have won all of their games and considered to have won their games without cancellation or rescheduling of games. So we've got Leinster, Wasps, Bodo Begla, Munster and Racing. Okay, they will all be guaranteed home knockout games. All right. But then looking at the other sides, you've still got some class teams in there then. You've got the likes of Toulon, Clermont, Bristol, Exeter, Toulouse. Really, really good. And I think the big thing for me looking at that is if you look at the Pro 14, you look at the English Premiership, and you look at the top 14, whether it's conference-wise or whether it's table-wise, the teams that are at the top of those tables are in that knockout stage, apart from a few exemptions, which we'll talk about. For me, the lucky side looking at that, Gloucester, having a woeful season in the Premiership, but they qualify for the last 16 of Europe, which is going to be a massive task for them. Thing to note here, obviously, I've highlighted them in red. The Scarlets did make it through. I think they finished in 5th place, but obviously because they had that game cancelled against Toulon, all right, that still meant that they had to. They weren't considered to have won that game then. But for those sides that were in the top tier, it was really, really promising regardless, because whether you made it through to the top tier in the Heineken Champions Cup or whether they dropped down to the Challenge Cup, all the sides that entered this year were going to get knockout rugby. And then if we look at the Challenge Cup in the last 16, so the sides on the left-hand side of the screen, these were the top 8 sides that qualified throughout the first stage of the tournament. And London Irish, Ospreys and Leicester Tigers all securing home draws due to the fact that they won their games outright. But another big positive for us is that the Dragons and Cardiff Rugby, talk about that in a second, but Cardiff Rugby make it through as well. The beautiful thing about this is that there are only 3 sides in the Challenge Cup that are guaranteed home home knockout games. So I looked into it a little bit more detail. So the ruling that ECPR set out was the clubs in the same league cannot be drawn together. So it's unlikely that the Ospreys will face the Blues or the Dragons, and likewise any sides from the Premiership. But if, for example, if you look at the teams on the right-hand side of the screen, the Blues could play any one of those teams across the other side. So from our side of the draw, they could play the Tigers, Argent, or Newcastle Falcons, but it's likely that the Blues will face a side coming down from the Challenge, from the Heineken Champions Cup then. So it's going to be a difficult draw for the regions, but if we look at it from a Welsh perspective, we've got to be happy the 4 sides are going to be in knockout stages of Europe.
Yeah, it's the first time in a long time I think that's happened, isn't it? For the 4 regions, and for the regions to get better. I know it's a big debate here in Wales between the national side doing so well, the regions may be struggling. For the regions to get better, they've got to be pushing themselves against the best teams in Europe. Let's quickly mention that before we get to some more exciting news about rugby in Cardiff. Cardiff Blues, no longer from the end of the season. Cardiff Rugby. Let's get both of your thoughts on that. Rhian, the Dragons obviously changed from Newport Gwent Dragons to the Dragons. Why did they do that for you? And do you think it's made a difference to the fan base of the Dragons?
Well, I think originally it was to try and encourage the rest, the sort of the warrior territory, perhaps, to embrace the Dragons in the area. But personally, I think the regional cracks go far deeper than changing a name. I think it's great for Cardiff. It'd be interesting to see how the other Cardiff rugby teams, deal with that, because I think people forget that it's not just the Blues in Cardiff. So great for them. One does wonder, we know it happened with the Bluebirds in the football, and that didn't sort of last long. They ended up having to come back. It's not a cheap thing to do, to rebrand yourself, and at the moment, with in a pandemic where rugby and there's no crowd income, so one wonders if why the decision was made now. I'm not questioning the decision; that's up to the owners. But it does make you think that it's an expensive thing to do. You don't rebrand, and I know they're going back to their blue and black colours. But yeah, it's just an issue of timing for me.
And for you, Ben, as a Cardiff fan, does it mean much to you, or is it just one of them things?
Well, one of the biggest things is that I'm a Blues fan from outside the region. I'm well sat within the Dragons region, but for me, the Blues was always the team that I enjoyed watching growing up. For me, them going across to Cardiff Rugby, I think it just brings a sense of unity, because they've talked about how Cardiff RFC will also be rebranded under this umbrella then. So, you've got that continuum through the regions. I don't know how it'll work down at age grade level, because I know up until sort of under 18s level, the Blues is split into North and South. So it's Blues North, Blues South, covering all aspects of the Cardiff area. Whether that will change and they become Cardiff A, Cardiff B. But I just think the inclusivity of the fact that they're all going to come under this one title, Cardiff Rugby, Rhian's going to do a little bit on it now, but I think to include every aspect of rugby in Cardiff, I think it's a great move moving forward. Yeah, there's going to be financial implications, obviously, but like you said, this is a long-term thing by the looks of things, and the fact they've moved in the opposite direction to what other regions have, where they've dropped the place name from their team name, it's a strong decision.
Yeah, it is. We had some exciting news recently coming from the Cardiff rugby scene. Tell us what's going on.
Sorry, I did a and I kept myself muted. No, it's really exciting. The Cardiff Blues, well, they're still the Blues as far as this bit of news is, but obviously they'll change their name. They're setting up a visually impaired team. So this is, really great news because it's a sport that's been embraced by those who are visually impaired in Wales and wider. And there's one guy I know, Gareth Davis, who I used to be a work colleague of mine, and he is a BI rugby international, and he had to play for England because we haven't got an international setup in Wales. But it's absolutely great now that the Cardiff Blues visually impaired team has been set up, and they're asking people to follow them on Twitter so that they can all, people, whether you're visually impaired or not, can be part of their journey. And they're looking to play some of the Sevens touch rugby teams in the Cardiff Arms Park, and they're asking people to contact them via Twitter, which of course is at Blues VI Rugby, one word. So they want to say a big thank you to the Cardiff Blues for being so embracing and deciding to put this group together. And it's absolutely, brilliant news. It's hoped that the other regions and other teams even will do the same. And once lockdown's over, because obviously training is a bit difficult at the moment, they train at Tuesdays at 6 p.m. at Cardiff Arms Park. And while people can just drop in, it's best to let them know via Twitter, because they can arrange then, if people are visually impaired, that they can pick them up at the train station or bus station or whatever. They're also saying that if you are visually impaired, but you don't actually want to play rugby, that's fine. Come along anyway, because you can be part of, like any rugby club has different roles for different people. And it's just a fantastic opportunity for you to join in with like-minded people and enjoy the game of rugby and do it in such a hallowed ground. Cardiff Arms Park, who wouldn't want to be part of that? We are hoping to have Gareth on the show on a future show. So we look forward to talking more about that. But in the meantime, they will change the name. It will be the Cardiff Rugby VI team. But it's just a great pat and back for them. Brilliant.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and it shows that rugby is for everyone, isn't it? Doesn't matter anything about you. Absolutely. You're welcome in rugby, and that's what it's all about. Just quickly before we jump into the Six Nations action, there are some exciting ongoings with the Welsh Rugby Roundup show. We are, of course, doing a few interviews. Myself and Rhian spoke with the Wales women's head coach Warren Abrahams recently, and they'll be going out live just before the start of the Women's Six Nations at the beginning of April. We've also spoken, Ben, with Johnny Evans. He spoke really openly and honestly about his time for different clubs and the way his time at the Scarlets came to an end. Can you give us a little synopsis of what else we spoke about with him? Yeah,
so I was fortunate enough to go to school with John, so I've got that sort of affiliation with him where I always wanted him to do well. And he started his career with a massive bang down at the Dragons, and he really made some inroads. In my opinion, rather unfortunate not to pick up international honours. But his career took him down to Bath, where he spent some time playing in both the A side, and he had a couple of appearances in the first team in the Premiership at the time. But then obviously coming across to the Scarlets, and as it's been well publicised, unfortunately he wasn't offered a contract renewal due to the COVID pandemic. So he's probably one of, I'd imagine, quite a few players, that have unfortunately managed to lose their contracts due to COVID. But he spoke really, really positively with us. This isn't the end for him with rugby. He's still very much passionate about the game. He's keeping himself in really good shape, and is hoping as soon as lockdown is eased and we can go back to playing rugby, that he's hoping to play some form of rugby with the aspiration of going back to playing professional rugby, because he's still young. He's still got plenty of time left in his career. So the interview will come out and you'll see exactly what he thought on it. But again, from all of us at the Dragons Balls, we're wishing him all the best as he goes forward in search of regaining his career in professional rugby, because, my gosh, what a player.
Indeed. And quickly then, before we move on to Ireland against Italy, myself and Rhian spoke with the fantastic Mike Spiky Watkins. Rhian, what a whirlwind of an interview. We went from everywhere to everywhere, didn't we? Tell us a little bit about that interview.
What a star. If anyone gets the opportunity to watch it, please do, because he tells it as it is. And it was pretty no holds barred. He had a very spiky career with a relationship with the WRU, but some of his insights of the game and some of his recollections and stories are well worth listening to. He's a great character, and I really hope we get back to do a follow-up. And if anyone gets the opportunity to read his book, I think the link, Brandon will put the link up, do, because I hadn't read it up until we did the show, but I have now, and it's really, really good.
Yeah, he spoke so openly and so honestly about everything. Rhian's now going to jump down as we cover Italy against Ireland, and then Rhian's going to lead us on the big one, England against Wales. But Rhian will be back very shortly to discuss England against Ireland. We are going to welcome our first guest, the co-host of the Ulster Rugby Roundup show, Nigel Quigley. Nigel, good evening. How are you?
How you doing, guys? And well done to all your Welsh viewers on the Triple Crown at the weekend, and happy Davis Day. And
yeah, we as you can imagine, Nigel, we don't want to big it up too much. You know, as a nation, we were quite calm on the weekend. I think I might have heard one household that was a little bit excited, but other than that, I think the whole of Wales was quite calm on Saturday. If you catch my drift.
Indeed.
But no, we're going to chat about the Ireland and Italy game beforehand. So Nigel, you're going to cover all things Ireland for us, and Brandon, you're going to have to grab hold of your Italian being within you and try and deliver the best that you can on terms of Ireland. But Ireland and Italy kicked off early on Saturday, and Ireland ran out 48-10 victors. Nigel, you've got to be happy to see some tries from Ireland on Saturday, surely.
It's a win, and I think, I spoke with people during the week who actually thought we might lose that game or be in trouble with that game. I didn't think we would be, and I'm trying not to be disrespectful to Italy, but I can see what they're trying to do, and they're bringing in some youth, and they're trying to play expansive rugby, but they're not there yet. They're quite inaccurate in attack, and in defence, sometimes their defence just goes to sea. It disappears. They're on the wrong side of the pitch. So it was job done, pretty much as expected for me. I mean, I would have expected that kind of scoreline, and they did get a bit of freedom to play. They did enjoy themselves. They didn't have a lot of defending to do, which showed. And they managed to get a couple of new caps on, which was a benefit. Young Craig Casey came on and I thought played really well. Ryan Baird came on and gave a good account of himself, albeit against probably opposition that by that stage were flagging. I thought Funny Joe's just mentioned one there. The Ian Henderson try that was disallowed early in the game was a bit of a baffler to me. I mean, I've seen those reviewed time and time again, and I don't understand how that wasn't given. Didn't affect the result, of course, but it was bizarre. But I think, Ireland will be happy to get a bit of momentum, a bit of a decent score on the go, but they'll keep their feet on the ground. This was a team that have so far suffered 3 heavy defeats.
Yeah.
On form are probably going to suffer 2 more. And I don't think you can read too much into that, because against Scotland, against England, we're not going to have that freedom to run forward like we did on Saturday, because the ball will come back to us. And I thought Italy would test us a little more in the backs, maybe a little more high balls trying to, but they just didn't really seem to get into the game at all. And that's the 3rd game in a row we've seen that. Yeah, it's very hard to read a negative into a 48-point scoreline. It really is. They conceded a try later on, which they probably felt they shouldn't have. They probably switched off. One complaint, and I think we talked about it earlier, Ben, was what is the benefit of bringing Billy Burns on for 10 minutes in a game like that? Just don't see the point in it. And then, people are going, is Billy Burns the real deal? Blah, blah, blah. We need to give him time in the shirt against decent opposition to see if he can do it. We haven't seen that yet. Johnny Saxton played 80 minutes, albeit he finished at centre, which took me a while to catch on, but I had a few beers at the time. Where's Johnny Saxton gone? Oh, he's moved out to centre. Okay. Because I was worried they'd actually put Billy Burns out to centre, and I thought, that's not going to work. But no, they put Johnny out. He's a bit of a larger lad, so more fit to cope with it. So, yeah, I mean, it's not all negative. There's nothing really negative in it, but I don't really know what you can take from it as far as going forward, except that it's momentum and it's a win. And it was a good win, and it was as good a win as anybody else has put on them, let's be honest. So, it's something to build on, which Ireland need at the minute. They really do. So, I was happy with it, absolutely. I didn't think we were going to put more on them or less particularly. It was about where I thought it would be, because that's where the other games have been. But it shows we're maybe not that far away. That it's just a few tweaks, a few changes, and Ireland could be back in, competing with these teams again.
Yeah, I think I did my own little bit of analysis after the game, and when I watched the game back over, and obviously, when you're watching it in the heat of the moment, you miss certain things. But I think the big thing that Ireland would have taken from that game is their speed of ruck ball was fantastic. I think I read somewhere that they averaged about 3 seconds per ruck, which, in the game that we're playing nowadays, that speed of ball, you are always going to give sides trouble. And I think Saxton was pivotal in sort of where Ireland played on the field. We talked a little bit about it last week, but there was a little bit of crabbing at times, but I think on Saturday it proved beneficial to the Irish because they were looking to pull that Italian defensive line out of shape and then look to hit those loose shoulders as we saw for the Hugo Keenan try. But for me, I just want to talk about, in my team at the moment, he starts in my Lions back row. Just how good was CJ Stander on Saturday, Nigel? I mean, the man is made of steel. He carries so hard, and every ruck he's there competing, you've got to be thinking yourself, he's almost guaranteed a place in our Lions squad, if not in the starting team at the moment.
He's a strange one. I mean, I've seen him have a couple of quiet games too, but when he's on it, my God, he's on it, isn't he? You say, he's in the middle of everything. And he had a great game. He definitely did have a great game. Saturday very pivotal. But I thought the whole pack were very good. But again, I'm trying to keep my feet on the ground here. We have to remember who the opposition were. But it at least allowed them to work those areas and get that speed of going, because that is something they can build on and translate through, hopefully, to the next game and the next game. Because the forwards, I don't really think have been a problem for Ireland, to be honest. No. I mean, if you look at the possession stats, even back from the Autumn Nations Cup and in the first two games, they've had plenty of possession. It's what they've done with it once it's left the forwards has been the issue, really. Yeah. And as you say, they did stretch that defence, and they did find the soft shoulders to get through and create gaps. But they're not going to find that as easy against Scotland or England, let's be honest. The same as they didn't against Wales and against France. But what I always try and remind myself was we didn't get stuffed in either of those games, But had we done a few things a little bit better, we'd have been in them. So it's not a monumental turnaround that Ireland need to do. It's a few little tweaks here and there. But the pack are not the problem. The pack are actually functioning very well this season.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think they've got such a wealth of options in that back row just alone. I think Will Connors put his hand up definitely on Saturday. He had a really, really good game. But I think for all the forwards, like you mentioned, they moved Burnout to 6, which I thought at the time that was a questionable decision. But I really liked the look of Burnout.
That worked. Yeah. And I'll tell you why I think that worked. I think there is an argument, and the argument went on in Irish forums before the game. Is there an argument for having Rhian, Henderson and Byrne on at the same time? And I think that game maybe demonstrated it has legs. Again, we have to be cautious of the opposition. But you're talking about 3 serious ball carriers, 3 serious guys in and around the rocks, jackalers, and I think that those 3 really did disrupt. Everybody played their part, but I really like seeing those 3 in the team at the same time.
I think it did make a massive difference. And like you said, we've got to keep feet on the ground. But I'm going to come across you, Brandon, and we finished up on the back row there. For Italy on Saturday, I thought Meyer, he is single-handedly trying to pull that Italian pack around the field. His work rate is incredible. How much are they missing the likes of Pelledri in that pack at the moment in terms of just getting that front football they need?
Yeah, they're really struggling with it, aren't they? Italy have brilliant build-up play, and they can certainly control possession. They can certainly control the territory, but there's no killer instinct in that team to get those tries. And the likes of Pelledri has scored quite a few tries for Italy. He's a powerful player, can get over the gain line and put Italy on the front foot. I do think they missed Stephen Varney on Saturday quite a bit. It's just his ability to snipe around the breakdown. Although Callum Brayley is good, he's not quite at the level of Stephen Varney. And Stephen Varney really speeds the game up to a level where the likes of Garbisi, the likes of Canna then can really have an influence with the ball. But I think credit does have to go to Ireland. Their defence did hold strong for that game. But did Italy truly test them? And there'll be much bigger tests for Ireland this Six Nations. And yeah, I think it's going to be the same case for Italy for the last two rounds as well.
Yeah, I think, like both of you have said there, that Italy are building, and I thought for the first sort of 20 minutes, they looked really promising in attack. They were really, they were getting a decent speed of ball, and they were making inroads into the Irish 22. But it like you said, it's that killer instinct, I thought the choice of Garbisi and Canna, they've sort of toyed with the option of going with a dual playmaker system a couple of times in Italy, and sometimes it works really, really well, and then other times, it doesn't. You've got that extra kicking option. But the biggest thing that I picked out from both Garbisi and Canna is when it stops working, when they stop making yards, and in some cases, and actually in the majority of cases, when they start going backwards with the ball, their kicking game was so poor. It was easy kicks. I remember at one point, James Lowe collected the ball. He had time to do his bootlaces up, readjust the ball, put his hair in a new ponytail before he had to kick the ball. And with someone like Lowe, who's got a rocket in that left boot of his, against sides like that, they're going to punish you and you're not going to find your way into these games. I really like the look of Brex in the centre. He was a hard-hitting and hard-running centre. But like you said, they've got some really, really good players. I love the look of Ioane out on the wing. I think I've watched him quite a bit in the Pro 14 this year. He's a really nice looking player, but they're just struggling to unlock those outside channels. And
Ben, is Canna too late to play at centre? Because I agree with you. And I've seen him play at centre twice now, and I just thought to myself, he's not big enough. He's not quick enough. Yeah, he's a second playmaker, but does he offer anything beyond that? Well, because you need your centres attacking with ball in hand as well, and they've either got to be a guy that will break tackles or a guy that will find gaps. And I don't think he does either, does he?
No, for me, I think if you look attacking-wise, Garbisi is that player that's going to unlock defences. But then at the same time, Garbisi is the guy that you want at 10. So it's really difficult because they obviously want to play this dual playmaker system, but at the moment, Canna is the only viable option. I don't know if anybody will come up through, but it just seems the same sort of thing with the Italian. The regions do exactly the same, or the club sides in Italy. They play the ball. They go through phase after phase after phase, making maybe 5 or 10 yards, and then they kick in loosely. But that was my summary on the game. A win for Ireland, a bonus point victory. Hopefully they can build some confidence moving forward now. But obviously we've got to look forward to the next round now. And we'll catch your thoughts on what we think is going to happen later on. But Nigel, thank you very much for joining us, buddy. And we'll catch you a little bit later on, my friend.
Okay, but no problem, guys.
There we go. I'm also going to jump out now, and Rhian's going to jump in as Ben and Rhian chat with a Scotsman and a Frenchman. It's not the start of a joke to a pub, but I will see you in a bit.
Welcome, Ian, and welcome, Yannick and Rhian. Oh, triple threat here. Lovely to have you all on this. We're going to have a little chat. We've looked. Oh, and the daffodil is there. I've got mine on my collar. It's just about hidden under the beard. But yeah, let's jump in. Obviously, we were, as rugby fans, deprived on the weekend. We only got 2/3 of our Six Nations fix. And for me, probably the game that I was outside of Wales, England, obviously, but the one I was most looking forward to seeing just how these two sides were going to perform. Ian, I'm just going to get your thoughts on it first of all. How do you see this being resolved, my friend? Do you see Do you see anything happening in terms of the game being rescheduled? Do you think it's going to be cancelled and Scotland given the win, or cancelled altogether? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, the deafening silence from Six Nations means we're not really sure, but obviously I assume you guys have seen the latest reports from France where Fabien Galtier has breached protocols by going to watch his son play in a match, and also the story about some of the players going out for waffles. I mean, if we're looking at the calendar, it's kind of, when can we possibly reschedule it? And also what I think, I mean, there has been precedents set in other competitions whereby walkover wins have been dished out, and sometimes without blame. I mean, Glasgow lost a game against Lyon. Lyon were awarded a 28-0 win through no fault of Glasgow. And so if it's proven that France have deliberately breached protocols, I mean, obviously, I'd quite like the 28-0 win for, Scotland's league standing positions, but I do have a bet on France to win the tournament as well. So, I'm kind of a bit swayed there. But it's, if it's true that he has broken protocols, then I think the Six Nations will have to act. Yeah,
and and we're looking at it from a perspective that we don't know an awful lot at the moment. There's a lot of rumours at the moment, and I think it's a lot. For me, though, Yannick, we'll come to you on this, to see so many players that have now tested positive and to hear these little rumours coming out about these breaches in COVID protocol. Do you think French rugby have to act now and launch a full inquest into this, or how do you think that they're going to deal with this?
Well, I think it will be a full investigation anyway. The sport minister asked for one, and not to be an internal one. So somebody house than the French Federation. So it will be a full investigation. I know the French, they don't want that because now everything goes so fine. So the last thing they want is try to put pressure on Galtier or even fire him. Is the last thing we want. So I don't know where that is, what's going to happen here. But what's sure, it will damage a little bit what is set up now, because I mean, I heard yesterday, I was listening to a program with Bernard Laporte, so the French president, and he was basically on the radio. They were shouting at each other. Even one commentator left the studio. They was fuming. It was really, 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 really bad. So they do lose the plot. There's a lot of pressure on them. Everybody knows they breached the protocol. Fabien Galtier did go see his son play rugby during that weekend, so it was the week league there, and so yeah, so full investigation definitely, and we see what's happened. I don't think for 1 second they will dismiss Galtier. Well, I hope not, but I don't think that will happen. But after, I don't know what's going to happen. I heard a date to rescue France-Scotland on the 26th of March. That is a date of possibility to have that game play on that date. Friday, 26th of March. That is a date that I heard. So I think next few days we will find out.
It's good that they've potentially got a date moving forward, but yeah, I'm going to come to you with this, Rhian, because we had an incident earlier on. It was last year now, where a Barbarians-England game was set up to be played. Players breaching protocol, and obviously those players received hefty bans and fines. And if you look at Josh Adams, not even the instance where he contracted COVID, but he broke protocols and he missed 2 games for Wales. So for you, as a neutral then, looking at this from a completely, sitting on the fence perspective, what do you think is going to be done, and what do you think should be done?
Well, if you breach the protocols, I saw an explanation of, what a bubble is, and it wasn't quite my idea of a French bubble. Is obviously different to my idea of a bubble. But, if you breach protocols, and, if it is true that players went out and had a waffle, and to me it just beggars belief. There's there are reasons. Yes, you can go out for exercise, and we have this position in Wales where the players are released back to clubs, which might be over the border in England, but they are regularly tested. But this, and I think Ian pointed this out, the calendar is so tight now, to have to reschedule, because it's not only it could put Scotland at disadvantage, because whatever happens, unless they bring in a weekday, neither Scotland nor France will have played for a month effectively, at least. So that puts them on the back foot immediately. But why should why should Scotland be penalised for a French issue? And to me, Six Nations have really got to look at this seriously, because it's something that we all knew that it could happen. I think I've been quite surprised we've got this far along with the Six Nations without any disruption. But when I was expecting it to be something accidental, so I think they need to stand up and really they've got to make an example of, because we can't have this towards the end of the season, or for any other competition.
Well, it's funny, you mentioning, I agree with everything you say there, but you mentioned the implications on other competitions, and linked into what Ian said with regards to the fact that the calendar is so tightly packed. The one thing that I read, and I saw it was thrown about almost, that because we've got a week off this week, that the game be played in this gap. No. But looking at it, unless it is played within that international window, for France, not so much of an issue. But Ian, for Scotland, if the game gets rescheduled within a non-international window, Scotland get extremely affected by the fact that so many of their players play rugby outside of the Premiership, outside of the Pro 14, and they play in the Premiership, the top 14. So it would almost seem like a punishment. So there has to be a resolution, surely, that you feel, inside an international window.
I've also seen a potential date mentioned. I mean, this was just after the match had been cancelled, about maybe playing the game in July. But it would clash with a Lions v Stormers match if the Lions tour actually goes ahead, or whatever. Maybe not a tour, maybe it's going to be a home-based competition. But like you said, there's 10 players in the Scotland squad who play in England or the top 14. I mean, obviously this is a sort of downfall in only having 2 pro teams in Scotland, but sort of player-wise and financially, we can't afford a third pro team realistically. And we don't have that same strength and depth as, say, England or France. I mean, France, when they had their Autumn Nations Cup final, they had sent a sort of second, third string, but also made a game of it because they do have such strength and depth. But we'd be losing guys like, Stuart Hogg and Johnny Gray at Exeter and Finn Russell. And those are probably our 3 sort of standout players, or ones you could say are world class. And Hamish Watson as well, but obviously with him being in Scotland, that's not so much an issue. So yeah, I don't know how they can resolve it at the moment. Are the Six Nations going to wait for the French sports minister, who I've been practicing saying her name, by the way, Roxana Maracineanu? There we go. So are they going to wait for her to for their investigation to be complete? We will have to wait and see, but I believe it's L'Equipe that have done most of the digging, and they've found these things out. So fair play to them on that. But if it's true that they have broken bubbles, you can't just let them away with it.
I'm sure more will come out. This story's going to run and run, but you do feel that you're having to sit there and wait on a daily basis to find out when you're going to play. Great, thanks you two for standing in. We're now going to go to the next item, which of course was the small game that was held on Saturday in Cardiff. That was Wales versus England for a Triple Crown. So thanks again, guys. Speak to you later. Thanks, Yannick, for standing in. Okay, we're waiting for Deb. We have Ben who's going to speak for the Welsh, and I'll wave my daffodil because Deb's just come on and she likes daffodils and she loves Wales.
I'm just going to sit there and cry. Happy St David's Day to you both, and congratulations on the win.
Yeah, and
Muted Rhi.
I know it's because Joe's watching. What I was say was the Wales England matches never disappoint. It's always a drama of some point, and there's always drama about a decision somewhere in there. But to start off with, Deb, what were your expectations, and how did that pan out?
Well, I had really hoped that we wouldn't have the same sort of penalty count that we've been having, but England gave away 3 penalties in the first 4 minutes, and they started and that's how they carried on. They gave 14 penalties away, and Sorry, say again.
The penalty count has been going up per match, haven't they? You'd expect it to start going down.
Which I was speaking to I had one of my brothers WhatsApp messaging me, and the swearing started coming in as the game was going on. But one of them said, "There's no one seems to be there to say cut this out. You need to stop doing this. That just doesn't seem to be happening." Mara gave 5 penalties away. I think for myself, 2 of them were a bit debatable. Sorry about the cat. 2 of them were a bit debatable. I think the deliberate knock-on was harsh, and I think at one point he completely moved away and was still penalised. But he gave 5 penalties away. I just, that you don't deserve to win a game where you give 14 penalties away. You really don't. I'm an old English person. I quite like seeing Wales being successful. And I'd be more than happy to see them do the Grand Slam now. I haven't. Six Nations wise, I've been thinking about this. I've watched a lot of England in the Six Nations in recent years, and in 2016 I was in Paris when they lifted the Grand Slam trophy. They've not played good rugby since then, I don't think. Albeit they got to World Cup final. Let's not forget that.
Oh yeah, can't take that away.
But if we look at the Six Nations, they played awful rugby last year and lifted 2 trophies.
Yeah, but again, I suppose Wales won 2 matches and they didn't play particularly brilliant rugby. The first 2 matches, but then I just felt that their discipline is improving so much. Wales and Alan Wynne-Jones. He's, in the autumn there was obviously issues there. He didn't play well, but he's now put himself back in contention for captain of the Lions. And Gatlin was there, and he must have been saying, "Well, this guy is back on form." But the whole team seemed, there were errors, but the team seemed more galvanised. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that. For a Welsh player, if you're pulling on a jersey against England and you're not fired up to play that game, then you shouldn't really be on the pitch, full stop. But I think all of those players went into that game knowing that they were going to go into a titanic battle. They went in as underdogs, and to be honest, I think Wales quite enjoyed that at the moment, going in as underdogs, because it gives us that opportunity to prove people wrong. But yeah, I think Alan Wynne, and it's got to be said for the other senior leaders in the team, the likes of Justin Tipperick, the likes of Ken Owens, those figures were monumental in that victory on Saturday. And you can talk about the controversial decisions all you want, but for me, it came down to the fact that England lacked leadership.
Yeah.
Not so much from the aspect that, the decision making, because, we've talked about in previous years when Rob Shaw, we talk about the 2015 World Cup, Rob Shaw making ridiculous decisions. It's not the decision making that's the problem. It's like Deb's just said there. Who's on that field grabbing the England boys by the scruff and going, look, we're giving away too many penalties. This is what the problem is. Stop doing it. But also, it's got to come from the sidelines as well. Like, I I'm one of the people that I'm sort of on the fence with Itoje. I think he's a fantastic second row, but as a player, I think sometimes he can be a bit hot-headed, and especially in those sorts of environments, you need someone to grab hold of him, like an Alan Wynne-Jones, to say, look, that's enough now, cut it out, okay? But it just didn't seem that there was going to be anything that came as a result of it, you know? But just going back to the way Wales played, I think we just took our opportunities really, really well. We didn't have a great deal of opportunities in terms of attack, but when we did, we made them count. We pressurised England into giving those penalties away, and we pressurised them into mistakes, you know. And Debs, I know you talked about this when we had a little chat the other day. Elliot Daly looked so uncomfortable at fullback. He really didn't look like he was in the right place for me on the field. And I loved watching him play. On the 2017 Lions tour, he was fantastic. But he looked so out of place on Saturday. He genuinely looked like he didn't know what to do to make things work. But yeah, it was fantastic to see Wales really grab that game by the scruff of the neck, especially at that point where Ben Youngs pulled it level to then take us back out. You know, we pushed for those penalties, and ultimately, regardless of controversial or not, we won the game, and that's what it counts. You know, there's the W on the sheet, and we move on to hopefully take on France as long as everything goes well with what's happening over the side of the pond. But we're on for a Grand Slam, you know, should we beat Italy. So yeah, it's a good place to be at the moment.
Yeah. I don't like talking about Grand Slams before. Let's get Italy. We tripped over there. I'm old enough to remember that. But you know, there were times, Deb, when England was scything through the Welsh defence, and they just couldn't sustain it. You know, there were sparks there, weren't they? And it was just, but they just couldn't. You know, I've seen Wales in this position where, you know, you've got all the territory and you've got all the power, but you just cannot. Those silly mistakes, those silly penalties, just cost them dear, didn't they?
Well, you know, you scored 3 penalties in the space of 8 minutes after England drew level. I mean, that, you know, you've got. I'm glad that Callum Sheedy came on it and showed us what a fantastic kicker he is, because he's been brilliant for Bristol this season. You know, again, you're not going to do. Elliot Daly, I think, is one of these players who is innately talented, without a doubt. But he is not a fullback. And we go back. It seems like Eddie Jones has to squeeze people onto the pitch, even if it means putting them out of position. And it's like saying, doesn't matter. Never mind if you've played fullback for 5 years. I don't care about that. I need this bloke on the pitch. And, you know, I think he's done Elliot Daly a disservice by putting him in that position. You know, particularly when we look at someone like Liam Williams, who is a world-class player. You know, that really highlights how much Elliot isn't a 15. You know, he dropped the ball twice, didn't he, in good attacking positions. And it, you know, 23 men lost that game. Again, there were game changers on that bench. Bennell got 10 minutes, Robson got 11 minutes, and Max Malin's got 6. You know, he is a talented fullback. Give these guys a chance to make a difference. But 3 substitutes came on and gave 3 penalties away.
Yeah.
And I have to say, Ellis Genge was lucky not to give another when he pushed the guy's face into the floor. You know, he was lucky not to give a card. I know he was being held, but he pushed his face into the floor. How he got away with that, I do not know.
And that was the big problem with the game, wasn't it? It was just it felt as though at times it wasn't starting because it was just being blown up for both sides. You know, it was just, but it was very stop-start, wasn't it? And at times quite frustrating because you think, oh, someone, you know, we're just going to start have a game of rugby here, and then it was all back to, you know. Back to lineouts, which then definite improvement. Not didn't fire on all 4 cylinders, but there was definite improvement there on the set pieces and the lineout in particular.
Yeah, I think we looked confident as well to take those lineouts. You know, you look at the point where against Ireland, we were almost frightened to kick it into touch because we knew full well the pressure that we were going to be under. Again, improvement against Scotland, but I think against England again we went up a level. And it was giving that clean ball to the likes. And I think a mention has to be brought up for the young lad scrum half for Wales on Saturday. My gosh, he really, Kieran Hardy took that game by the scruff of the neck. He thought, right, I'm up against it today. I'm going to make sure that I show everybody why I'm playing and what I'm doing. But the speed of ball that he brought to the game, and it really, for me, I broke it down a little bit and I looked at it in terms of the tactics Wales seemed to employ. The amount of times Wyn Jones was out in the back line as sort of almost sometimes a decoy runner, but sometimes to provide that loop around. And you look at the modern game and the way things are going, you need those players who can interchange with the backs, can allow that space to open up. And if you look for the Liam Williams try, the ball that's passed around the back to Biggar actually comes from Wyn Jones, and he stood with probably the inside centre would be standing. So in terms of attack, we definitely saw a little bit more from Wales. And I think towards the end of that game, we looked like the Wales of old in defence. Sheedy, don't get me wrong, 9 times out of 10, that pass goes over his head and it's intercept and it's try time in the corner. But I think the defensive system around him is allowing him to make that rush up to put pressure on those ball players. And seeing Louis Rees-Zammit, against Johnny May, that was the race we all wanted to see. And I was gutted it was quite late on in the game because I think both players must have been absolutely drained by that point. But yeah, it was just seeing Louis Rees sprint off into the distance. But yeah, for me, Wales just looked hungrier in all aspects of the game. And the one that summed it up for me was Owen Farrell around the 70-minute mark. He's dawdling back towards the 22, picks the ball up. He's not looking to kick, he's looking to run, but he's almost walking pace. And Justin Tipuric comes in, catches him underneath the rib cage and sends him back a couple of yards. For me, that was the difference. England seemed to run out of ideas and run out of patience. The penalty count got against them. And when they started to see that game go away with them, I think the patience just ran out. And it was just the case then, we had that scrum at the 77th minute. As a Welsh fan, I always think when we have those scrums in those positions, I'm like, oh, we're going to lose this bit. I can see it happening now. But for me, I was thinking, right, who's going to score here? Because it looked really promising, the attacks we were putting together. So, every game, Wales have improved certain aspects of their game that weren't very good the game before. And I think, regardless of what happened on Saturday, we've taken another step up now. And hopefully this will push us on now towards the end of the tournament.
Yeah. I think Debbie, that to me, these penalties are born of frustration. The English players, they look, it's frustration, isn't it? Something's not clicking there, and it's just I told you I love him, and I love the way he plays. He is playing on the edge, and we've got Welsh players. Owen Jones has always played on the edge. The great players do, but at the moment he's getting to the edge and he's falling off it, isn't he? Rather than getting away with it. And you're right. Some of those penalties probably were marginal, but to me, the whole team seems this penalty count is born of a frustration of not quite knowing what Plan B is.
So is it that there isn't actually Plan B, and that they are not players that are not capable of playing what's in front of them? That actually they've looked like players that are not capable of playing what's in front of them in every game, pretty much. I look at we've spoken about selection. It seems that Eddie Jones has been restricted on who he can have. We know that Premiership rugby is very powerful in that respect. But, I see him at virtually every single televised Premiership game. And I sit and I look at him and I think, why are you bothering? Because you're not going to be picking any of these players that you're seeing. I am going to mention the Simmons. I have to mention at least one every game, every chat we have. Sam Simmons scored his 12th try on Friday. His 12th try. But he's nowhere near the squad. I don't really understand what's going on. I'm not someone that's going to come out with the Saracens blame, because I'm a Saracens fan, so I'm not going to do that. But you do have to wonder whether lack of game time is an issue. And they aren't the only ones with a lack of game time. You know, I think I looked up, and George Ford, for example, had only played for Leicester once after the All Nations Cup. Would it be different in a non-COVID time? I'm not convinced it would. Eddie Jones is a very, very stubborn man, and it almost, Alex Good, European Player of the Year, didn't necessarily play well in an England shirt. He did play, but you might have thought he would fullback. You might have thought he'd get a chance, wouldn't you? So I don't know. I haven't been happy with the way England have been playing rugby for a few years now, and I would like to see it change, but I'm not holding my breath.
No, and I think that's it, isn't it? It's not having that plan B. It's almost the mindset. Eddie's mindset is, I've got the best players on the planet. It will work. At the moment, and it did to an extent, but now it's, I think Scotland were the first team that exploited the gaps that before were winning games because people just could not cope with that, that power, and then Scotland made it look easy, and they just don't. There's been, I don't know, there's been signs that England have tried to change, but it doesn't seem sustained.
No, I mean, I actually wouldn't want to spend too long talking about the team that didn't win here. I'd rather spend a bit longer talking about the team that won and actually won. Have got a triple crown in their closet. That was something that's been regrettable about the headlines for me. And the chat after the game, the British Broadcasting Company, or whatever they're called, that Wales are in that as well. And actually, really, all they spoke about was the England situation and the referee. And let's talk about Wales and what they did, and the fact that Alan Wynne-Jones is back to his very best.
Yeah, and I agree with you, but I think we're used to it as Welsh people that it's always a fluke. We're still living under the you can only beat 15 men if the rest with you, and it to us we just we take it. We're so proud, aren't we, Ben? We got the triple crown. As Ben says, we can see the improvement that side's making now. That Pivac is now sort of he's safe, I should say. But he's actually, the team are playing for him now. It's not this sort of. We seem to have come out of the transition. Whereas at one point, Ireland and Wales were on the same sort of level of the transition. With Ireland beating us and taking the lead. Now we seem to be a step further ahead. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, and I completely agree with your comment. I think for me, Pivac has to be safe now. You'd be a fool to get rid of a man that's building the confidence that he is. He's been given the time, and we're starting to see the results now. And like you said, this incremental step-by-step progress, it really is starting to transpire. And not only Welsh fans can see it, but other fans can see it as well, And you look at the stats across the overall tournament, we're up there with every player, that's playing in the tournament. But for me now, it's all about consistency. We play Italy next. For me, I don't want to see a great deal of changes. I want to see certain players given a chance. I know, Debs, you'll probably be, but I think Sheedy for me starts. Not so much for the fact that I think he could start against France, but I think you've got to show what he could do if he's allowed to control a game from the off. And not a game against Georgia in the tipping down rain in the autumn. And not a game against Italy where, there's nothing else on it. Give him a game that means something and give him that opportunity to stand up and take hold of that 10 jersey, because he is one of those players that can do it. And likewise for me, I would love to see Halaholo get a start. He had a couple of touches on that game against England. For his second cap, you've got to say that the carries he made were very strong. He took a huge hit from Tom Curry, and he almost seemed to just brush it off and carry on. So I would like to see a couple of small changes, but I think the bulk of that squad has to remain to simply, like we said, keep building on what we're doing. We're in a great place at the moment. We go to Italy full of confidence. We'll look to try, and who would have thought you'd sit down and look at it? we've played 3 games now, and we've scored a bonus point in 2 of those games before we play Italy. You know, the thought is absolutely incredible to think of it. The Wales are scoring tries, and it's like, oh my gosh, we've scored 4 tries in the last 2 games. We're getting dizzy, like, but yeah, really, really good, and we go forward full of hope, I think.
You mentioned Tom.
I totally agree.
Sorry, go on. I was saying you mentioned.
No, I was just going to
say. You go.
No, all I was going to say was about the tries. It's just so lovely to see Wales scoring tries again, and you know, the that's one thing. You know, the sort of Gatland era wasn't about scoring tries, but we're seeing that change now, and that's great. That's Welsh rugby for me.
And the competition rewards it, doesn't it? That's the thing now. The competition rewards tries, so it's a must, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Sorry, Debs. I
was just going to say, have a positive for England actually, in that Tom Curry made 18 tackles in that match. I think England have missed Sam Underhill. I think that was a big blow to their Six Nations to lose him at the start. But Tom Curry, he gave a fair few penalties away in the first 2, but to make 18 tackles in that game, I think he goes from strength to strength, really. So there's a positive on the England front.
Yeah, definitely. And I like Tom Curry. I think he's a great player. I think he does miss the complementary aspects that Underhill brings to his game. You know, Curry can go off making his tackles, and he knows that Underhill's not far behind.
Yeah.
But yeah, we look forward now and hope. Me as a Welsh fan saying this, I hope Eddie opens his mind and opens the door now. England realistically are out of the running. Start experimenting. This is the time to do it. And we're going to get everybody back in now, and we're going to ask, just before we finish, I got one question for everybody from each of the countries. So we'll go from the bottom of the table up to the top. Brandon, if you jump in as well, because you're going to have to be my Italian question first of all. But Brandon, to you first of all. Italy, they've got 2 games left now, one against Wales and one against Scotland. Realistically, what are Italy going to look to get out of these 2 games, do you think?
Well, let's put it straight. They're not going to win either of them. Probably going to concede 2 bonus points as well in the process. The thing with Italy for me is their build-up play is actually very good. If you look at the stats, their build-up play is really good. They just don't have the killer instinct. They just don't have that one player who is going to have that really nice darting run. They don't have the final pass. They don't have someone who's going to break over the line. That's where they're missing the likes of Minozzi and Pelledri. So I think for the rest of the campaign is to keep improving. They need to stick with Franco Smith. They need to stick with this young team and not chop and change. And I think this halfback pairing of Varney and Garbisi is a really exciting young halfback pairing that they need to stick with. So that's what it would be for them. I don't think they would have targeted a win this year, if they were being totally honest. Obviously, they'd have said differently to the media. But I think it's another year of building. And this question about them not being in the Six Nations is a load of rubbish, in my opinion. So let them build for the next 2 games. They're going to get smashed again. But, you know, they enjoy beating the Scots, don't they, Ian? So we'll have to see if that happens.
That was.
It's been a while now. It's been a while now.
but yeah, I'm looking at Ian coming to you next. You know, looking at the table, Scotland currently sit 5th due to the fact that they haven't had the chance to play France yet. Let's eliminate the French game because we could have that discussion until the cows come home. But you know, Scotland have got 2 games left. They've got Ireland at Murrayfield, and then they play Italy. For you, what are your hopes and expectations for these last 2 games, excluding the French game?
I think home advantage is going to be a massive thing, particularly against Ireland. I mean, we used to just get bullied with them quite frequently, but the last time when we played them, I mean, the last Six Nations game we played against them, we were pretty close. You know, and I don't think Ireland maybe aren't fully confident at the moment. I'd hope to sneak that one, and Italy, you'd hope and expect. I would certainly expect a pretty comfortable victory and a BP. But yeah, the Ireland game's going to be the big one to decide where we finish. And obviously
definitely.
whatever happens with France.
Yeah, I think they've got to target that Irish game, and like we've discussed with Ireland, that they're very much in the stage where there's little things that are starting to work for them, but on the grand scale of things, there's major issues and major cracks that Scotland will hope to exploit. But saying, you take the French game out, from 5 games, Scotland to win 3 games at the end of this campaign, if your predictions come true, as a Scotland fan, you've got to be delighted going into that saying, you've come close to beating Wales, you've beaten England, and then you've got Ireland and Italy to come. That's got to be a good Six Nations for Scotland.
Getting that 38-year monkey offer back by beating England away proved that we are a good side. This is the thing, like the strength of the teams is so close. It all relies on maybe a lucky decision or a bounce of the ball here and there. But it's about time that we started stringing together results rather than just like getting 1 or 2 wins here and there. I'd definitely take 3 wins, especially when you consider the 2 away games would be England and France. It'd be above standards, and hopefully we won't be 5th.
Yeah, and Scotland are definitely getting up there as one of those sides now that you're almost fearful to play. As Deb, coming to you next, as you found out at the start of the tournament, for England, 2 games to go now. They take on France and they take on Ireland. So 2 big games coming up for the English. What do you want to see Eddie do in these last 2 games? Do you think he's going to stick with his tried and trusted system, or now that realistically the tournament's over, do you think he's going to try something a little bit more creative?
2 very different questions there. What would I like him to do? I'd like him to make changes. What do I think he'll do? I don't think he'll make changes. I think he'll go in pretty much with the team that, let's be honest, have beaten Italy in this competition so far. They haven't turned into bad players overnight. They were in a World Cup final not that long ago. I predicted France to win the tournament before it started. I have a horrible feeling that by their own stupid actions, they're going to throw that opportunity away. But I'm not sure I can see England beating France. Ireland in Dublin, with a crowd there, that's always Ireland's game for me. Without a crowd, I'm not convinced England are not going to finish this off with just beating Italy at the moment. I'd like to think that they will beat Ireland in that last game, but Ireland have a good game against Scotland. Their confidence is lifted. We could be seeing England finishing 5th.
Yeah, it is a daunting thing as an England fan. Like you said, 2019, you're coming off the back of a World Cup final, and then it just seems, even though they've picked trophies up, it doesn't seem that the English game has progressed in the way that they would have wanted. But do you think that, like you said, there's a big difference between what you want to see and what you think you will see? Linked into what you think you will see, with Eddie selecting these players that he knows can deliver, do you think, it's going to be, you're going to fake it until you make it? Is he going to keep selecting these players until it clicks again? Or do you think ultimately he has to look at making changes down the line?
I have to say, I think he has to make changes, or England have to make changes. If he doesn't, is it a big Australian conspiracy before the next World Cup? Because we've got to start using some of the informed talent in the Premiership. And as I said, those players on that pitch haven't suddenly turned into bad players. But if we finish 5th here with 1 win, he's got to make changes, or England have got to change their head coach, for me.
Well, that is a thing that there is definitely pressure on management, and none more so, I think, pressure-wise. We'll come across to you next, Nigel. Farrell has got 2 big games coming up in front of him now. He's really got to knuckle down now. He's got to have a niggly game against Scotland, and he's going to face an English side that, let's be honest, they're going to come not so much feeling sorry for themselves, but looking for a reaction, looking for that improvement. What do you want to see from Ireland in these last 2 rounds of the tournament?
I'd like to see, I think up front, Ireland are sorted. I think we can match any other team up front in the tournament. Absolutely no qualms about that. It's out the backs we've had the problems. In both the first two games, the crabbing attack, the kicking away, it was very aimless attack. Now, we saw more fluid attack against Italy. Feet on the ground, it was against Italy, but at least it allowed them to practice more open play, more wide play, kicking it over the top. We saw a lot more variation in that game than we've seen in the first two. So they're going to want to work at that. Both the games we've got to play are winnable for me, but it really depends on how the backs play. It really, really does. A couple of things in attack, obviously, we've discussed that. They need to vary their attack a bit more. They can't just keep running into contact and recycling. The interesting thing for the remaining two games that we didn't see last weekend is how our back three will defend and how they will put under pressure, because we didn't see that at the weekend. We did see it against Wales. We did see it against France, and we certainly will see it against Scotland and against England. So that's going to be interesting. There may be a change or two there. There's talk of whether Stockdale will be brought back into the team. He's played 40 minutes of rugby since the start of January. I don't think they should be rushing him in, but Ulster maybe. We'll know that on Saturday when we see Ulster play Leinster, whether he plays a half or he plays 60 or 80 minutes. I think that'll tell us if he's going back into the team. Because I think Dan McFarlane wants to do the same again, a half for Stockdale, half for Balakoon, and bring them both in slowly, but he may not get that pleasure. It really depends on the attack style of the backs, mate. It's going to be down to that. I think the forwards will match them up, both teams, no problem. It's down to the backs. Yeah,
definitely. I think they've gone with this, we'll call it Project Leinster then, where they've padded the side out with, the Leinster side, and with a few players dotted in here or there, and hoping that consistency from Leinster transpires across the national side.
Is that not? Sorry for interrupting, but is that not Farrell cheating? Really? I mean, I've got an issue with that, because he's got 4 provinces to pick from. Those 4 provinces are sitting at the top of the 2 conferences in the league they play in. I mean, Ulster and Leinster have run away with that Conference B. Munster have run away with Conference A. He's got 4 provinces to pick for. His role as a manager, as a coach, and Cats, is to bring those players from those provinces and put together a unit that can step up to the next level. And I can't help but think, and I know this doesn't go down well with some Irish fans, and Leinster have to be enjoying it because it's great. And it's great that they gave him that consistency. But he's basically taking Leo Cullen's work and sticking it out and saying, go and get me a win. And that's not a coach. Leo Cullen did all that work.
Yeah.
And Lancaster, so, he's got to bring the best of those 4 provinces together and create something even better. Not just take the best of the 4 provinces and say, you'll do me, because that's what some fans seem to think has happened in the Italian game,
Yeah. Well, and it is interesting that he has taken that approach of filling the team with as many Leinster players as he can. But, it seemed to work against Italy, but again, feet on the ground, it was against Italy. But, the next thing, you talk about the fact that they've moved the Leinster side up to the Irish setup. Yannick, I'm going to come to you next. Is this French side, it really seems to have come together, and they've got a real sense of cohesion, that the management seem to be working well with the players seem to know their roles and responsibilities well. What's this big change that we've seen in France over the last 18 months to 2 years that have seen them from this side where, you've got the cliche comments of, oh, we don't know what French side are going to turn up, and what has been the big change for you?
Well, it's been a lot of change in the management, and obviously Galtier come in, Sean Edward come in. They take one of the top physical, guy, Giroud from Toulon, who all the physical preparation. I mean, they go referee in now as well. So I think they kind of try to be ready for everything, and they prepare clearly 2023 World Cup. And they are really on the path to every single details. They work on it. And so it's a big, but now that happened, so we with the COVID problem. But COVID means apart. I mean, they go tremendous setup now. And they go for the World Cup. And that's it, really. Is what they're doing. They focus, and the top 40 change as well. They got to bring more youngster player. So it's why we got all those youngster coming through, like Dupont and Tamac, and that all those players now, all the youngster player have time on the top 14, so they play, so we can see them, and it's incredible. It's just incredible. We go 3 full team. I mean, we got 3 number 9, 3 number 10. We go 2 or 3 fullback of top international level. We never did have that before, and now we got it. So
yeah,
that is a big change for us.
And I think, I'm trying to avoid the stereotype here, but we're starting to see the French side of old come back with this against Ireland. You look at that first sort of 20 minutes. Ireland were pumping into that French defence. And that Sean Edwards unity in defence, you can see that there. But that's all France needed was that one attack, and they're over for that try. So, it's definitely that belief that's been reinstalled in the players. But just quickly, Yannick, for you, you've got, Scotland, when that gets rearranged, England and Wales left to play. Grand Slam still on for you, or what are your thoughts on that? Definitely.
If we beat England, and I think for me, I'm going to surprise you, but I think for me that could be a much tricky game to win. If we beat England, because England will be really pumped up to beat us, but as always anyway. But if we beat England, I cannot see Wales and Scotland beating us in Paris. I just cannot see it. But I don't want to put a shadow on you on St. David's Day today. But if also if we lose against England, I don't think we'll lose against Wales after. I think your game come at a really bad time, I think, for Wales to play France in Paris after England, or we go for the Grand Slam, or we will want to beat you anyway because we lost against England. So I don't know. That is what I think. If we beat England, we for Grand Slam.
Oh, well. For me, personally, I see England being probably Wales's worst enemy, and Rhian, I'll come to you on this, because like Yannick just said there, if England manage to pull up the massive upset that is beating France, then they're going to play against Wales then with the determination to run completely over the top of us. But looking at it from a Welsh perspective, we've got a trip to Rome and a trip to Paris. Dare we say those 2 magic words? Do we dare to dream that the Grand Slam is on? What are your thoughts in the last couple of rounds for us now?
I see this Welsh team as being able to drag out a win. They've got that confidence. And I said from the very beginning of this tournament, when they won that first game, is they've got momentum. And it's the start of the belief. And it may not be winning pretty games prettily, but they certainly know how to stretch out a win at the moment. If they get a really good game against Italy, and I'm with you, Ben. Gatland used to love doing wholesale changes to play Italy, which I always thought was a bit disrespectful. I was a big fan of Gatland, don't get me wrong, but I think that they need to continue that momentum, give some of the bench starters. They'll probably have to wrap some of the seniors in cotton wool and perhaps not play people like AWJ and whatever, because you want your big guys there for France. But if they can rack up a good score against Italy, I've been here before when I've seen Wales winning ugly and winning despite the odds. But what I am liking is the way that Wales are improving. And as you said earlier, Ben, the weaknesses they have in one game, the next game they've improved on. And a lot of detractors who still think Wales are only winning because, it's the other side that are giving them the games, are failing to see those improvements that are happening week on week. So I very rarely talk Grand Slam, but I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah, I think the big thing, and a few people have said this, is Wales have got a really good habit. Well, we call it a bad habit then, is we have a dreadful year, and then all of a sudden, from nowhere, we pull a few victories together and we win in trophies. And I think sometimes it papers over the cracks, but for me, I definitely see a Welsh side that is on the up at the moment. And I do see us wiping Italy to the side. It'll be a tough 20 minutes at the start, and we'll have to be aware of that. But I think as the game goes on and the game progresses, we are going to run away with that game. And I reckon it could well be similarly to Ireland. I think at that point where Italy, sort of the 50, 60 minute mark, they fall over the edge, we're going to run away with it. The French game does frighten me. We play France in Paris on the last weekend. The only thing that I'm grateful for is that there's not going to be a crowd there, because if you imagine that, Stade de France filled with passionate French fans as their team is going for the Grand Slam, you've got to think that we're going in as underdogs for, but that's our opinion. So, guys, we'll catch you all again as we go into the last two rounds. So, big thank you to Nigel, to Rhian, to Debs, and to Yannick for their opinions. And we will catch you all very soon, guys. Thank you very much.
Very welcome. Thank you.
I said particular thanks to Yannick for dropping in at such a short notice too. Literally after the show had started. So well done.
Okay, that's right. No problem.
Diolch yn fawr iawn.